From I-526 to Mount Pleasant's plastic bag ban, I sit down one-on-one with Coastal Conservation League founder Dana Beach for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Mr. Dana Beach, it's so good to see you again.
Thank you, Quintin. It's always good to see you, and it's been a long time.
I know. I had to come over to a different location because you were here at a different location downtown Charleston.
That's right.
You have since retired from the Coastal Conservation League and have passed over the baton, obviously, to Laura. How's that going?
Well, it's been exciting. I like it in a lot of ways because we're writing a history of the Conservation League, and Virginia is actually writing most of it, and I'm writing the introduction, which has gotten to be longer than probably anybody will want to read. But I'm in just about 2 blocks away now in a very nice office, and I'm enjoying it. I'm working also, though, with the Conservation League during the transition.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
Wow. You talk about the Coastal Conservation League, and there's so many issues going on right now. I want to take you to Sandy Sen's page. She tagged me in something on Facebook just recently, and she said this, quote, "Please share, quote, hey, Dana Beach, here's the troublemakers come. Do you hear the war drums banging? I do," unquote. This bill is nothing about developers and overdevelopment. This bill is about infrastructure and overzealous conservation efforts to slow down very needed government projects. I-526 being an example. And best yet, the governor just signed it.
Well, that's a funny comment. I-73 is really the project that was more often discussed with respect to this, what's called the automatic stay. And to cut through all of the sort of legalese, basically what the system used to do was if a citizens group, the Conservation League, or a neighborhood association challenged a permit, there at the state level there would be a stay on any construction, because it doesn't really make sense to go before a judge and say, "Judge, here's my case," if the project's already been built, because a judge would logically think, well, it would be very difficult to unbuild a road, for example. And so what I think has been mostly misunderstood about this is just the limit of the way the stay used to apply. It only applies to state permit appeals, and it only applies through what's called the administrative appeals process. It doesn't continue into the judiciary. And so those are usually pretty fast. You get an appointment pretty quickly with an administrative law judge, and he or she will render an opinion fairly quickly, often within 6 months. So the stay really didn't ever apply longer than that, and it's never actually held up a project. And she mentions 526. Well, there are no permits for 526. That's not what's holding up 526. What's holding up 526 is there's no money for it. So I guess the point I would make, and Senator Sen illustrates this, is that people are quite confused about what the automatic stay really is and what it isn't. And I give you another example. When we've worked with industry like Boeing to provide mitigation, and also with the State Ports Authority over the harbor deepening, their concern was never an appeal of a state permit. It was always an appeal of a federal permit. And there is no automatic stay with the federal permit. So it's been a little bit of a tempest in a teapot, and I think more chest thumping, and I think as you described it, that's pretty flamboyant language that Senator Sen used, but it's really been more chest beating than it has been a real factor in the progress of development.
And let me reread that again. It says this, "Hey, Dana Beach, here's the troublemakers come. Do you hear the war drums banging? I do," unquote. This bill is nothing but about developers and overdevelopment. This bill is about infrastructure and overzealous conservation efforts to slow down very needed government projects. What are those projects that she's talking about in your mind?
Well, I think, like I say, I don't really understand exactly what you just read, but let me tell you what I think the projects, because it's a sort of strange syntax, but let me tell you what the project that's been most often mentioned. It's the construction of a new interstate between Rockingham, North Carolina, and Conway, South Carolina. So we're talking about a project that 10 years ago was estimated to cost $2.4 billion. So we have said over the years there's a better way to do it. For a tenth of the money we can improve existing roads. And we have been have challenged really the proposal by Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce that this new interstate must be built. It comes down to priorities. The state of South Carolina has a very limited amount of money for all of its transportation needs. And the idea that we would spend $2.4 billion, really more than that because the price has gone up in 10 years, on a new interstate to Myrtle Beach, especially when there is an alternative that's much less expensive, 1/10 as expensive, improving 501.
Right.
We did the study on that. Is, to me, something that every citizen should be concerned about going forward without this kind of oversight and without any challenge. I mean, frankly, I would think someone in Charleston or someone in Columbia or someone in Greenville, knowing the needs all of these regions have, and they run the gamut from a few new road alignments to repaving where we have poor pavement surface to bus rapid transit. I would hope that and think that businesses and citizens would all agree that the ability to challenge a wasteful project like I-73 should be something that citizens can avail themselves of. That is something that would be desirable. And yet, when you read what Senator Sen has said, it sounds like she doesn't want anyone to question what the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce decides to do with our tax money.
Let me go back to 526. I know that you talked about perhaps a hefty price increase on the potential of I-73. What is the potential price tag increase of 526 if it is ever built in your mind?
Well, it was originally estimated to be about $400 million, and it went on the permitting, the planning.
Right.
Let me first note before anything else.
Okay.
There have been no permits issued for 526. It's not a matter of anybody holding any permits up, filing any lawsuits or anything. There have been no lawsuits filed because there have been no permits issued. So that is a mistaken perception that some people have, that the opposition, of whom we are one, has somehow held things up. But that's not the case because the permits haven't been issued yet. But the project initially was a $400 million project. Then the most recent estimate was about $725 million. And that was 5 years ago. So it's probably more than that now. Let's just say $800 million. What, I don't know because there isn't a new estimate out yet. But what that means is that we are $400 million short of being able to build it. We do not have that money. It does not exist in any pot anywhere. The county has gone to the State Infrastructure Bank and said, well, we want the money that you have, and the State Infrastructure Bank has wisely said, well, where's the rest of it? We don't want to give this to you if you can't come through with the whole project. And the county hasn't been able to do that. And they gave them that directive about 4 years ago. So there's the perception and reality. The perception is maybe articulated by Senator Sen, that there's somebody out there holding up 526, and if only they would go away, it could be built tomorrow. The reality is we're almost $500 million short of being able to build it. There are no permits. No permits have been challenged. And the county itself sued the State Infrastructure Bank. We didn't sue anyone. The only people who've sued anyone are the county council led by Chairman Vic Rawl.
What do they do next if there are no permits? Nothing's been built yet. Why is there still politics?
Well, like I say, this has been such an emotional and such a poorly understood at a level of detail that the public really needs to understand it issue. But here's where I think we go with it. There are projects that were approved for funding by the county council and to be paid for by the half-cent sales tax. One of those was the flyover at 17 and Main Road. There was a project that was approved, funded, and permitted by the last half-cent sales tax, almost a decade ago, and that was the Pitchfork at Maybank and River. Those projects have not been completed. The flyover is not even on the drawing boards. The county council has failed to move these projects along that they promised us they would do with our money. The Pitchfork, unbelievably, is still not finished 10 years later, and we're talking about less than a mile of road. So, and further, the latest revelation on the Pitchfork is that the county council leadership is saying we're not going to build the little sections of it because somehow they're not consistent with whatever we want to do with 526. Well, I have to say, and I hate to say this because I don't know it for sure, but either we have the most incompetent transportation planning department on the face of the earth, or somebody is sandbagging us because they want to see the pressure increase and the tempers continue to flare over that terrible intersection at Maybank and River that we could have resolved 10 years ago. So what is going on here? That's what I want to know.
Well, my question is this, just listening back to what you just said, okay, can't they just build the flyovers and then go back to the State Transportation and Infrastructure Bank and say, hey, can we get some money now?
Sure, they can build the flyover. The money is there. It was approved by the half-cent sales tax. The last one, they bonded a portion of it. This one, they have the ballot allowed $200 million to be bonded, and that's more than that project would cost. And everyone supports it. I mean, it literally everyone on Johns Island, the conservation community, the business community, the money is there. What is the county council doing? Why haven't they moved it forward? And again, I have to say, I wouldn't have said this until I read about Chris Christie.
Right.
But now I'm not sure that there's not something going on that is an attempt to bottle up things so that people will get madder and madder. And they should. And they should. I mean, I drive out to Rockville quite often, and I am angry every time I sit in that traffic, just like everybody else is. But it could have been fixed 10 years ago.
Well, okay. So what's your message right now to Charleston County Council in your mind?
Well, I say, let's separate, let's be honest, separate the debate over 526 with these small-scale projects that will make people's lives better right away. I mean, literally, the minute that project goes in, traffic will flow vastly more smoothly at that intersection. Now, if the little sections of the Pitchfork go in, it'll be even better. So my message would be, I don't expect anybody's mind to change about 526. I don't expect Vic Rawl to decide he doesn't like it, or Elliott Summey or any of the former Mayor Joe Riley. But I do expect them and us, all of us, to be able to work collaboratively together on projects we do agree on. And we do agree on, we think, the Pitchfork, we do agree on the flyover, and we agree on other road improvements that are internal to the circulation of traffic on Johns Island. And I'm just talking about Johns Island right now, but there are plenty of examples around the region of small investments that need to go forward right away. And we want to be helpful in that, and we have tried to promote those things, and we've talked to literally everybody we can about it.
As you know, I've asked you this at least 3 or 4 times in any of the interviews I've done for you for Quintin's Close-Ups. But let me ask you again. Is 526 dead or alive?
Unless somebody has hidden some money, and a lot of it, $500 million, it simply can't be built. The permits could be granted tomorrow. No one could appeal them, but it couldn't be built because we don't have the money to build it. I mean, we literally at this point have about half as much money as it will cost. So no, at this point it cannot be built. Let's get over it.
So in other words, this is all about a power grab of somebody trying to get to the next level. It's not about 526.
It isn't. It's about posturing and about being presenting things in sort of emotional and demagogic ways,
okay,
when instead of really trying to solve problems. And that's, I think we all ought to demand that whatever side we stand on these issues, that our politicians honestly move forward on the things we can agree on. That we don't sandbag anything anymore. This is just getting old, and it's harmful to everybody.
So what do you agree on when it comes to Charleston County Council and the State Infrastructure Transportation Bank?
Well, I think that at this point we've got the bank has asked the county to produce the source of money that they will use to pay for the rest of the road. The county hasn't been able to do it. The county has sued the State Infrastructure Bank. The State Infrastructure Bank won the first round because the judge threw the request to go to the Supreme Court out.
Right.
The county needs to just drop that lawsuit. That's a non-starter, and it's a no-win situation. And sit down with the bank and come up with a negotiated outcome. This is what mature adults do. I'm reading a history of World War II. That was pretty bloody,
okay,
but eventually we had because we had to, a negotiated outcome. I guess the analogy would be we don't want to end up with the kind of the equivalent of the slaughter that we ended up with in that instance here, and we don't have to. You know, nobody's shooting anybody. We just need to be mature adults and sit down and work through these projects.
And let me move on to some other issues. Describe to me the following one word: Mount Pleasant's plastic bag ban.
Well, it's great. I mean, there was a wonderful article, and not wonderful, but an enlightening article in the paper today about recycling in Horry County. And
right,
you know, we're sending our recycling up there, right, because ours isn't running yet.
Right.
Well, guess what? In Horry County, they close the machine down every 2 or 3 hours to disentangle the plastic bags from the machinery. And the machinery, not only can plastic bags not be recycled, but they also gum up and make it harder to recycle other plastics and aluminum cans, right, and cardboard. Sure. So they are harmful to the very process of recycling. It's not just neutral, they're harmful. Not to mention the impact to marine life, not to mention the impact to the landscape in a community that thrives on tourism. Right. You know, where we don't need to have the landscape, you know, completely covered in plastic bags flapping in the wind. So good for Mount Pleasant, and I think it was a great conversation. Lisa Taransky went to it. I didn't go, but she said that there were a lot of good points that were made. A few people talked about, worried about E. coli in their food, which someone on the council said, well, do you wash your vegetables? To which this person responded, yes, and she said, well, that should be enough, you know. I mean, you don't have to get
too
sick
technical
from a bag that you use over and over again any more than you need to get sick because you use your fork twice, you know. I mean, you don't throw your fork away every time you use it. So anyway, I think it's great. And right now, of course, the plastic bag industry, and I distinguish it from the plastic industry, because the plastic industry, there's a lot of plastic, and some of it is highly recyclable, and some is not only not recyclable, but it's even harmful to recycling, like plastic bags. Some of it is useful. Some of it, you could say, even in our society, is even essential. Some plastic is. But plastic bags, single-use plastic bags, are the worst example of America's really susceptibility to products that not only we don't need, but are quite harmful in the long run.
Well, let me turn to some other issues. And this is an editorial from the Low Country Source. It reads this: bicycle activists should wait on a new Ashley River Bridge. When you hear that, you say,
well, you know, I'm beginning to think that the biggest problem we face on this planet is inertia and bureaucratic intransigence. The bike lane on the Ashley River Bridge has been studied, it's been funded, and it's been approved, and it hadn't been built because of political foot dragging. There is not going to be a new Ashley River Bridge for a long time. Now, I will say that this person, I don't know where, it sounds like an East Cooper person, it would probably be worth saying, why don't we take some of the funding from 526 and replace the Ashley River Bridge? And I would say more power to that person and to that idea. I think it's a wonderful idea. And we will eventually have to replace the Ashley River Bridge because it's getting pretty old and it doesn't work like it used to. But at this moment, we can provide access right away for the hundreds and potentially thousands of bicyclists who would use that lane by doing what we've already planned to do. And that's also, as I said, that project has been, you know, basically bollocksed up by political finagling.
Let me go also to your editorial in the Post-Inquiry, and it reads this: flawed development patterns foreshadow a failed future. What could you add to that?
Well, what I was trying to say, you know, I think one of the problems that we all deal with is that a lot of times we focus on the wrong thing, thinking there's some silver bullet to solve our problems, you know, whether it's 526 or, you know, more lanes on the Ashley River Bridge or whatever it is. The reality of our urban areas is that they are very complicated, but there is one single thing that is more determinative of their efficiency and their function and their future than any other aspect, and that is the street grid. How is the street system laid out? And this sounds like people beginning to go to sleep when you talk about it. I mean, I can't get anybody's attention on this subject. But if you look at Charleston, the city of Charleston, and every other historic traditional city and town in America that was built before 1940,
right,
they have a grid of streets with blocks and intersections and options. And to get from here at the corner of East Bay and Calhoun to the marina, let's say, over at Lockwood,
right,
you have 15 or 20 different routes. And so if Calhoun, there's a wreck on Calhoun, you can go up to Charlotte and go over, or you can go down to Wentworth.
right.
This is a tried and true, literally it is a 6,000-year-old design standard that we've applied at every city across the globe, and it works. We abandoned it 50 years ago and started building cul-de-sacs. And every cul-de-sac goes into a bigger cul-de-sac, which goes into one big arterial road, whether it's Maybank Highway or Mount Pleasant, Highway 17, Johnny Dodds. And what happens is it concentrates all the traffic on one road instead of distributing it across a network of roads. And so the difference is you got 15 ways you get from here to the marina, but if you're going from, let's say, Sam Rittenberg Boulevard up to your friend's house at Chathamos, well, in that case, you got two ways. You can go up 61, or you can go up the Glen McKyle.
Sure.
But that's it. And the result is that both Glen McKyle and 61 are highly congested.
Right.
Folly Road is the same way. And so, all I'm saying is that where we have the opportunity to build a dense street grid like Johns Island, because that was a blank slate and the city has not taken advantage of it like they should have, we need to do it. And if we don't do it, we shouldn't be surprised that the outcome is massive traffic congestion and an ever increasing need for more lanes. Let me give you the sort of mother of all examples of this. Cane Bay. Cane Bay is this mammoth development in Berkeley County, 5,000 acres.
Right.
It is like some people call it dendritic, basically you got one road that goes in, and then you got a little neighborhood, and then that road goes off, and their roads go off to that. But they all feed into this one road, and then guess where they all feed into? 176, 2 lanes.
Right.
Well, 176 is already on the planning board to be widened to 4 lanes.
Right.
It's not going to be enough. It will eventually reach gridlock. And that is the fate of every arterial road, collector road like 176 or Johnny Dodds. They eventually reach gridlock. Now, Mount Pleasant, if you think about it, they've decided that they need to build more of a network of streets. So they've extended Hungry Neck, and there's some problems with that, but they've begun to build that grid. And then you've got Ion, which was built with connections to Hobcaw and Heron Point.
Right.
So all we're talking about, it isn't rocket science, but somehow, the problem is that I'm almost, I don't know, I don't want to sound like what I'm criticizing is sort of like the silver bullet, but in the good old days, before I was around, even, there were planners like Pierre L'Enfant who laid out Washington, D.C.
Right.
And they were artists, really, in a way. They not only knew how cities worked, but they also knew what was inspiring to people, what a humane scale looked like. And so every city, the Doxiadis plan in Columbia, the old wall city of Charleston, and then its extension up into Ansonboro to the west, to down to Gibbs and Murray.
Right.
All of that followed a design pattern that had been set in Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago, which is a grid of streets. And when I was in Santiago, I wrote about it.
Right.
There was a plan in 1543 that laid Santiago out. It was a grid of streets, and it works beautifully. It's a great thing. If we don't get off our behinds and start laying out grids of streets wherever we can, and that means across the lines of neighborhoods, so that a new neighborhood goes in on Johns Island and the streets are stubbed off so that the next property that's developed can connect, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Dana Beach, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Well, thank you, Quintin. It's great to see you again.
Oh, likewise. Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Yeah.